at that point we just had Colden left, and we dropped down from the falls, kind of taking that little, it's not a shortcut, but it's a short trail that isn't used too much, but I love that little section of trail. It's so cool. And then we went up Colden, and I think that was one of my favorite summits. We got up there around 11 p.m. and off the distance is just like dark, except for Lake Placid. Like Lake Placid is this kind of like, it's all lit up with the lights, but the rest is just like this dark vastness around you. And I love the rock and the darkness, and I like high altitude mountains, and I've started to do more mountaineering in the recent years. And so like when I was on Colden, I was just kind of reminded of like some of the other mountains I've been on, and I like hiking at night. But coming off of Colden is definitely steep. And I just felt like we were in this purgatory of, when is this going to end? Or you're just like, you're still on rocks and you're still on ladders and you're not even like in the trees yet, and it's just like going on and on. And it was kind of hilarious, not at the moment, but that was the first time my legs started to like, I wanted to just be off my legs for the day. And we finally got into camp at 12:30 that morning. So that was our biggest hour day for sure.
So 5 a.m. start to 12:30 p.m. I mean, that's, you're at that point at 12:30 p.m. You're in the next day. So you're kind of pushing that, like, man, am I going to be out for 24 hours right now? Brutal.
Yeah. And we wanted to adhere to keeping shoes off for 6 hours each day.
Okay.
At least in the first few days, we felt that was important to keep our feet in good condition and just not push our bodies too far too fast. So we figured in the end, if we needed to make up time, we could totally do those shorter, times. But in the beginning, we stuck to that, and we pushed our wake up time back a little bit the next morning going into day 4 because of that.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, were there any times during that day, you mentioned this is your day 1 went awesome, day 2 went awesome, day 3, obviously, the wear and tear is coming in and the fatigue and whatnot. Were there any times during that day where you really started to feel what you're doing on a physical level?
Yeah, there definitely was for me. I had a little bit of a lull on Street and Nye. I wouldn't say that it was my body necessarily. I think it was more, it was kind of that 2:00 feeling, and we had just eaten some. And there's something about Street and Nye when you're headed up the herd path. For some reason, it just gets super warm in there. And it was just like lulling me to sleep at that
point. Like a warm sleeping bag.
Yeah, exactly. So I was headed up Street and Nye, and I started off pretty strong, and then we get about halfway up the herd path, and I'm just in a little bit of a funk, and that's just something I had to kind of mentally overcome. And by the time that we hit the summits and we were on our way back down, I was rocking and rolling again. But when I would say about halfway down Tabletop is where physically, for the first time, the fatigue kind of set in for me. And at that point, like Bethany said, we're both pretty good communicators, and we kind of talked through that. And I was like, I need you to take lead right now. And she, we're great about supporting each other when one needs it. So she took lead, and I just followed feet. And I was definitely a little bit of a zombie from that point through the end of the night. Going up cold, and it was just take a step, keep moving forward. And, I just kind of followed Bethany back to camp type thing. So it's great how we could just lean on each other when we needed it. But that was definitely the first time that I felt that fatigue.
Cool.
Yeah. And it was kind of neat for me, because in 2016 I had done that day solo, and I was watching Katie go through a lot of what I had gone through. in 2016. And for me, like, it was just a lot easier this time around because I had a partner and I didn't have to like just struggle with like the mental loneliness of doing it by yourself and having to like pick yourself up from every lull or keep yourself high. And so, but going back to your question, like, no, I never questioned that day. Like, I knew we were going to be getting into camp late. I knew it was a big day, but we completed it and we weren't limping, so we were still doing really good in my book. Yeah.
Cool. And going, at that point too, I mean, looking at your list, I could imagine if, from a mental standpoint, if you two got through day 3, you're there. And when I say there, I mean, you're obviously not at the end, but day 3 would definitely be hump day as far as the mountains go, because day 4, compared to what you guys have done, was a relatively lighter day. And then day 5, you're on the Great Range, which once you're already there, you're just cruising.
Yeah.
So would you say that at that point you guys were, once you got back to camp, obviously you're tired and you're super exhausted from that big day, but did you kind of start to feel like, yep, we got this at that point?
I did. And it was funny because, like, I knew Katie was kind of struggling on Street and Nye, and it was more of a mental struggle of just like, these two way out here, like, totally. Why? And, but I'm coming off Street and Nye, and I'm like, like, it's not a matter of when we finish. It's like, or it's not a matter if we finish, it's when we finish. And I'm like really seeing the end, which is silly because like the next day showed us that like you can be taken out by many things at any time.
Okay. So the story's going to get better now. Okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Like, but day 3, every day you build off of each day. Day 1 gets you to day 2, day 2 gets you to 3. And like, yeah, by the time you've done day 3, you're like, we can do this. So like, I think mentally we were really built up strongly at that point, and that's what helped us stay in day 4.
Okay, so let's take you through day 4. So day 4, you guys got back to your camp night 3 at 12:30 p.m., nice and tired. You planned to start at 6 a.m., and you were at the Lake Colden camping area, wherever you guys stayed, and you had on the tap Cliff, Redfield, Gray, Skylight, and Marcy. And if you're already out there, well, that is 5 high peaks, but if you're already out there, it doesn't seem, so from my perspective sitting here, it doesn't seem that big of a day, quite frankly, but I have a feeling it's going to get quite interesting here based on what you just said. So take us through it.
Yeah. Yeah. You want that, Katie?
Sure. Yeah. So our original itinerary actually had us going for Cliff, Redfield, Gray, Skylight, Marcy, Haystack, Basin, Saddleback, Sawteeth, Gothics, Armstrong, Upper and Lower Wolfjaw, and then camping, just below Lower Wolfjaw. So that was our original itinerary. And like you said, the Great Range, once you're up there, it's super cruisy, and I was really pumped up about this day. So we did sleep in a little bit, got up, hit trail, and went and snagged Cliff and Redfield first. Redfield, like I said, was kind of has a special place in our heart from the rescue we did together up there. So those were super easy, familiar faces, just popping up and saying hi and feeling good. Back down, grabbed our packs, headed over. We did the out and back to Gray and Skylight without much trouble. It was overcast at this point. Before we departed on our trip, we did know that this was the one day where we could get a little bit of weather. As far as we were aware, there was potential for showers that were potentially going to start around 4 p.m. or later. So that's kind of what we had in our heads. That's what we expected. Coming down off Skylight, it was still a little overcast, but nothing had really culminated in terms of precipitation. And we were like, hey, well, maybe it won't rain on us today, or maybe it'll be a super light shower and we'll get really lucky and we won't really have to deal with the weather that we're worried about. That was not the case. So we headed up to Marcy, and we got to the summit of Marcy at around just after 1:30 in the afternoon. And just as we're coming up, cresting the summit of Marcy, the rain starts up and the wind's howling, and it's, hard to stand up with the wind gusts, and the rain's pelting us from the side. And it wasn't super heavy rain at this point. So, I'm just telling myself, it's fine. Everything's fine. We're good. This is going to calm down. This is going to pass, get down off the rock face, and it'll calm down and we'll be able to continue, So I'm kind of talking myself through it. And we get down to the junction at the base of Marcy, and it's just a full-blown storm on us. And the wind is whipping and the rain's coming down really, really heavy. And we're just getting completely soaked through. And it was at that point that Bethany said to me, we can't continue like this. Our plan was to full pack over Haystack and then Basin and Saddleback after Marcy. And anyone that is familiar with the high peaks knows that Basin and Saddleback, with its infamous cliffs, are probably, arguably the most dangerous terrain in the high peaks. And we were supposed to be doing them with a full pack on our back. So doing that in a full-blown rainstorm, it's just, it would not be a good idea to try to attempt something like that. So, she said we should probably drop down to Slant Rock. There's a lean-to down in the Slant Rock area. But in my head, I'm just making these calculations going, okay, we're going to have to drop, over 1,000 feet. And I think it was like 2 miles in order to get to this lean-to. There's no way we're going to stay on pace if we do that. There's absolutely no way. So I'm scrambling in my head, just going, we're on pace for the record. We can't just give it up without trying. And so I think, okay, Snowbird, which is one of only 2 tent sites in the Adirondacks over 4,000 feet. And we happen to be fairly close to it. And so I said, okay, let's go check Snowbird, and maybe we can get there. We can get the tent up. We can just keep our stuff dry, kind of hunker down, get some rest, and we'll hike through the night and we'll finish our day. We'll still finish our peaks, And so, she ends up agreeing that we'll at least give that a go. We head down towards Snowbird, and, Bethany with her long legs is always slightly faster than me. So she gets up ahead of me a little bit, and I'm making my way down to Snowbird frantically. And all of a sudden I see her coming back up the trail towards me, and I immediately knew it was flooded. I mean, it was a terrible idea to begin with. I should have known that it was going to be flooded.
No, I mean, in my mind too, I had this like beautiful campsite. I've always wanted to camp at Snowbird, and when I got there, it was just like every tent site was a pool, a puddle, and it was also cold. This isn't a warm rain. It's windy. Our stuff is getting wet. Mine particularly, Katie had a good idea of like using a trash bag liner, and I opted for the pack cover, but my pack cover was so torn around from the wind, like rain was getting in from the bottom, from the sides. I was pretty soaked, and I just knew that like if anything happened to us at any point now, like it's just a bad situation. It's like just one of those you kind of get like this spidey sense of it's just a bad situation. And I kind of felt at that point, because we couldn't set up a tent anywhere to stay dry, our only chance to even stay in it was a lean-to. And so we dropped, and luckily Slant Rock lean-to is a beautiful lean-to that's on a hill and had a breeze, and no one was there, and we were able to like lay out all of our stuff and at least get dry sleeping bags for the night. And that's how we weathered the storm.
Figuratively and literally, your first curveball was actually quite the storm.
Yeah.
How fitting for the High Peaks to greet you with that.
It was.